Hey, coming up on your favorite podcast, we're back after a extended little holiday break. 7 days, no big deal. But hey, holidays are holidays. Football season is winding down. Week 17 is upon us. We made it. The NFL made it. The world made it. We survived. There's still a pandemic going on, but at least the football season's over. And I finished my fantasy season as a commissioner. Thank God. Oh, Jesus. Busy week of podcasts coming up here with More Peak Cinema with Lauren. A lot of people liked that first episode. Really thank you for that. We're going to bring her back. We're going to talk again in the next couple of days. But tonight, it is the NFL pod with Ryan and Zach. We're back in. We're talking about the Bills looking just fantastic. We're looking at the Packers. We're talking about the Chiefs. We're breaking down the playoff picture. We're looking at hired and fired. Which coaches are losing their jobs? Which coaches are getting hired? There's Urban Meyer rumors. And Dwayne Haskins loses his job before the season is over. So we're going to have to talk about that as well. All that plus your last power rankings of the season. And we send a couple teams to the Elimination Chamber this week for mathematical purposes. All that and so much more next on the pod. Hey, it's the Tim Anderson Podcast. I'm Tim Anderson, and it's time for football talk. We have our resident experts, college draft guru, and all-around nice guy, Ryan Nelson Kane.
Good to be here.
And also resident game theory football coach and all-around nice guy, Zach Nienaber. Hello, Zach. Welcome to the program.
You might be the first person to say all-around nice guy.
Well, I try to... I try to be nice, in my thoughts on the pod as well. It doesn't mean I'm always successful at that, but we always try to look out for you. I think you're a good guy. I know your Twitter followers would say something different, but I think you mean well. Well, it's good having you here. I got to ask you this first. Owner of a National Football League team, did Aaron Rodgers secure the MVP last night? Or 2 nights ago, Sunday Night Football?
I think so, especially since I don't think that Mahomes is going to play next week.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And why would he? Doesn't make any sense to. But is Rodgers going to play next week? Well, he has to, right? Because they need the number one seed still.
Yep, they still need to win to secure the 1 seed. So, you'll see Aaron on the field. And if last time he played the Bears was any indication, he will continue to add to that touchdown total.
Yeah, he's been terrific. Hey, Ryan, let me ask you, did Josh Allen at least enter the MVP conversation with his performance last night on Monday Night Football?
I just want to be really clear that Josh Allen is the reason that I just lost our fantasy titles. Asking me is a bit of a dagger here.
Well, this is partly why I'm asking this too, because I'm sure that you had to eat that last night. You watched all 4 quarters of that.
We chowed it away today. We've got the whiskey rolling today, but hey, it is what it is. So, he's a great player, man. He's having a great season, and to have numbers that are frankly better than Patrick Mahomes, I think should have entered him in the conversation a long time ago. He's just played excellent football all year. I'm not saying I want to be clear. I'm not saying he's a better player than Patrick Mahomes. I'm saying that this year he has better numbers than Patrick Mahomes. He's putting the ball in the right spot, and having Stephon Diggs there helps.
Does Josh Allen's success this year give you a little bit of pause as far as how quickly you give up on a quarterback? We're going to get into Dwayne Haskins in a minute, but when you look at a Trubisky, or you're going to look at Tua, or even Haskins if he lands another job down the road, or Jameis Winston, does watching Josh Allen's maturation prospects give you some thought that these quarterbacks, some guys are going to be ready to play right away, and some guys need this seasoning time, and you got to just be able to ride it out with a guy like him in order to get the payoff that you're getting?
Well, I think for me, it speaks less to the quarterback and more to which organizations are ready for a franchise quarterback. You look at how Washington is constructed, and the only receiver they really have there is Terry McLaurin. And their offensive line is getting better. They really don't have much of a running game. There's not a whole lot of help for a young quarterback there. That's partly why I think Alex Smith does better there, because he knows how to navigate those situations. But Dwayne Haskins, I think, first of all, Dwayne Haskins is a guy who mentally wasn't ready to be in the NFL. And that's something we can talk about a little bit later. So it's a bit of a personal issue with him. But I think if you're looking at Josh Allen and that trajectory, look at what Buffalo built around him. They started with a really good defense. They started with a defense that was going to put his offense in a position to win when he could get there. Then they went out and they found weapons. Yeah, John Brown signed last year. I think it was last year, the year before. And John Brown's a deep threat guy who can take the top off of a defense. They went and they traded for Stephon Diggs, and they put another weapon in his hands. They picked up a couple of tight ends who can go out and catch the ball and can still block in the running game. They went out and they drafted a running back who can shore up the running game for him so that he doesn't have to do everything. The Buffalo Bills as an organization have created a success in Josh Allen because of the team they built around him. It creates an environment for a quarterback to develop, which honestly I think may be more important than the quarterback itself. You look at Jacksonville right now, and you ask the question, can Jacksonville build Trevor Lawrence into a true NFL superstar? And I look at that team and think they have a decent offensive line. They've got a good running back in James Robinson, and they've got a couple of wide receivers on the outside. They might want to get one more who can catch the ball, and it could be a success spot for a young, talented quarterback. Now, obviously, there's defensive questions there too, like there were in Buffalo. Can they provide a defense that can put him in positions to win games? But that's what I look at more so than the quarterback itself. Is you want to stick with the guy as long as you can, and obviously Haskins had a short rope being a first round guy who was in a tough situation and had made some serious errors. But you stick with the guy as long as you can, as long as you're building things around him. And I think that the comparison between Josh Allen and Dwayne Haskins feels a little apples to oranges to me in that way.
All right, well, how about this then, Zach? If it's apples to oranges on Haskins, and we'll get to Haskins getting cut in a second, we see like Trubisky having some growth right now. Like he's starting to come around a little bit. Like they're riding it out. We saw Tua get pulled for Fitzpatrick last week, but I don't think anybody's ready to give up on Tua just yet. Is there something to patience being the virtue for a team like Buffalo?
Yeah, and the difference too, the Bears, aside from Robinson, are lacking some weapons.
Yeah,
they're throwing to an 80-year-old Jimmy Graham in the red zone, and Ryan does make a good point that you're better off getting all the other pieces in first, and then bringing in the quarterback and capitalizing on that rookie deal rather than bringing the quarterback in first and trying to build around him the next few years. And I think there are multiple examples of that. And like you mentioned how it's gone in Washington. And the interesting thing, the study in all of this would be where would Buffalo be if they took Mahomes the year before? Because remember, they're the ones who traded the pick to Kansas City.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. But yeah, that's true. And they didn't take Allen with a top pick. I mean, they did trade to get him, but where did Allen go in the draft? I'm trying to remember if I know they traded for him, but was he like the 8th guy or the 10th pick? He wasn't like a top 2-3 pick.
No, I think later. You're right. He was the number 7 in the 2018 draft.
And it tells me that, they saw something in him, but they obviously were willing to ride it out. A quarterback has to have some institutional support, but the head coach has to as well to make a move like that and to ride it out with him.
I also think that there's something to, on the individual level, there's also something to the eye test a little bit where, again, if we're going to compare him to Dwayne Haskins the next year, obviously, like I said, I think they're apples and oranges situationally, but personally, Josh Allen has the better arm. Josh Allen has the better legs. Josh Allen has the better eyes. If you look at all three of those things, yeah, he's going to make some mistakes his first few years, especially in a situation that's not ideal yet. They really didn't have all of the weapons they needed for him without, before they brought in Stephon Diggs. He really completes that offense. But he had all three of those things. So while he's throwing picks, they're what we can call teachable picks. Right there, you made the right read in some situations, but that read's not correct in this situation. Where Dwayne Haskins is throwing interceptions and making mistakes that are you're not paying attention, you're not doing the things you need to do, you're not making mistakes that are easily correctable, you're making habit mistakes that come over time with not understanding the game that you need to understand it. Josh Allen demonstrated a clear understanding of the game into his second year, where he was making a lot of those bad mistakes his first year, but he didn't make the same mistakes his second year. And then into his third year, you can see that he's doing really, really well.
So does that mean that Trubisky, that means, okay, so maybe the comparison's not Haskins. The comparison is more Trubisky. Trubisky is in the same situation, we could argue. He's winning games. The record isn't bad. Like Josh Allen's record wasn't bad, but I think we could look at the stats and we could say they're winning in spite of Josh Allen. But the addition of one weapon in Stephon Diggs has moved him from being like a 50% quarterback completion guy to a 68% quarterback completion guy. And Stephon Diggs is going to lead the league in receptions. First time a Buffalo Bills receiver has done that forever. Even more than Andre Reed. Is that comparison closer? And does that give us a little bit more of an indication of what Chicago's going to do? Zach, what do you think?
I think so. And they both kind of had, neither of them had the pedigree coming into the NFL, right? Josh Allen went JUCO to Wyoming. Trubisky played and started 1 year at North Carolina. Those are not football factories. And so I think you could expect some of those growth issues when you've got guys who haven't played necessarily at the highest level of NCAA football.
Well, we are going to do some apology stuff on this pod at the end of the season. Like in the next couple of weeks when we get into the playoffs, I'll just tell you right now, I laughed when the Vikings traded Stephon Diggs, not because I didn't think Stephon Diggs was talented, but because he wanted to go somewhere where he could be a star. And I thought, well, good luck letting the guy with a 50% completion percentage be the guy that's making you the star. And I was 100% wrong. Like, Josh Allen was absolutely what Stephon Diggs needed, and Stephon Diggs is exactly what Josh Allen needed. It's been this perfect marriage. I was 100% wrong. And you watched last night's game, Ryan, and you want to talk about two guys that are in a groove? Like, it's those guys and Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes and Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, look, you and I talked about this last year. We were at a speech tournament, and I said I think Stephon Diggs is a top 5 guy in the NFL. And you disagreed with me.
I did.
Rightfully so at the time.
I did.
But I think that this year is vindicating me a little bit on Stephon Diggs.
I think you're right.
That he's an elite route runner. He has elite hands. He has elite speed. This is a guy who breaks a game. And to be honest, it's a little disheartening to watch as a Vikings fan, because you look at what they're running in Buffalo, and you think, they have. Really, if you look at it on paper, the Vikings should be better than Buffalo, based on the weapons that we have. We've got Adam Thielen, we've got Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith has come on. We've got a really good running back who can catch balls out of the backfield. There are numerous places here where the Vikings should be better on offense than the Buffalo Bills. The problem is the scheme, right? What did we not do? We didn't feature Stephon Diggs. We wanted to run the ball, and that's fine in a certain sense. But I was saying this on Twitter this week too, that I think that we have a situation where this team is built for a fundamentally different system, where you can run the ball and that's fine, but that doesn't mask the issues that you have on your offensive line, like it would if you ran more of a spread system, like you ran more of a passing system. And that's what Stephon Diggs was asking for. He wanted more of a chance to showcase himself and to showcase the passing game of the team. And yeah, he got a little diva-ish about it, but it shows he's right, and his football sense is correct. That at some point, you've got to play the players that you have, and you've got to run a scheme for the players that you have. You have to run a philosophy for the players you have. And Minnesota didn't do that, and they lost a top 5 receiver in the NFL because of it. And it's really frustrating to see. And I think we got a really good end of the trade. I'm really happy getting Justin Jefferson. I think he's got a good shot at Rookie of the Year. I don't think he'll get it, but he's got a good shot at Rookie of the Year. He's in the conversation, and that's rare for a receiver. But man, is it disheartening to know that we could have had potentially all three, Thielen, Diggs, and Jefferson, in a system that was really rocking. And it's really tough to swallow as a Vikings fan.
See, Zach's upset.
I think we're overrating Thielen and Irv Smith a little bit there.
I kind of agree a little bit, but continue on.
But and I mean, Diggs has looked great, right? You can't take anything away from him. Josh Allen has looked great. I still want to see it in a big game here in the playoffs, and I still would like to see, how if Allen can sustain it.
We'll see. Yeah, I agree with that. And Ryan, I'll let you jump back in here in just a second. I agree. We have to see it now in a playoff game. Like, that was the big thing. Like, last night, I think, was a big part of it. You had to kind of exercise the New England Demons a little bit, which we'll get into that at some point in the offseason when we start talking about what they need. Because, man, after last night, I think they need a lot. But you say, okay, you're taking these steps. You're beating these good teams. Like, you beat Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago on national TV. You knock out the Patriots in convincing fashion on the road on national television. Now you have to win a playoff game and make that next step forward. Am I right, Ryan?
No, I absolutely think that's correct. It's kind of that old saying of, last year you knocked on the door. This year you got to kick the door in. I think that there's a certain level of maturity that comes with winning a playoff game. For everybody on the team and in the coaching staff, to be honest with you. And this team is a team that I think is built to do it. They can clearly compete with any team in the AFC. Honest to God, I think they can beat any team in the NFC. It's a good team. Now we'll see if they can do it in a pressure situation. I think they can, but you have to go out there and prove it. It's a prove it league, and they're a team that I think has the potential, but potential doesn't win games.
How about
their coaching staff still doesn't wow me.
The Sean, although I'll say this about McDermott, like, I think McDermott and Dable, they have to get a little credit here for this Josh Allen maturation. I mean, like, they have rode it out. I think they've pressed the right buttons. Dable never wowed me when he was an OC and when he was, I think, a Cleveland offensive coordinator for a while. I know he's been with New England for a long time as like a quarterback's coach and things like that. And I know he was an OC for the national champions down in Alabama for Saban one year. But what he's doing here is like I think showing some real growth. I've been impressed, but we'll see. I want to talk about this Haskins the Haskins issue before we move into hired or fired, another segment this week that we're going to knock at you. Haskins gets cut before the last game of the regular season. That tells you there's some reports out there that Rivera wanted to get rid of him last week, but that was worried that wouldn't be what you didn't think that was best for the team, especially when they looked at all the injury situations. Bottom line is he had one last chance last Sunday. He was terrible, and he was gone. But this is a pretty drastic move to cut a guy before the second season is done, Zach. Like, that had to have gotten so out of hand behind the scenes. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it had to have been a disaster. And it also tells me that they think Alex Smith will play, because I can't imagine that they would go with Heineke in a must-win game. Although, I mean, Haskins didn't give him much anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I expect Alex Smith on Sunday night.
So what do you do going forward, though, if you're Washington? I mean, Haskins was the guy you invested first-round capital in, and now you have to kind of go back to the drawing board, but you're not going to draft a quarterback, not where you are in the draft. I mean, are you? I mean, you're going to have to go out and find somebody, and is it Alex Smith or is it somebody else?
Well, let's not forget, if they don't win on Sunday night, they've got a decent draft pick.
Yeah.
Right? They're a 6-win team, so they're going to pick in the middle of the draft, and you might have one of those guys there that you like. I think that the move for them is extend Alex Smith for a year or two and figure out your long-term solution in those 2 years, right? Because it won't be Alex Smith. At some point, I mean, and it's a tale as old as time for Alex Smith, right? He's been the guy who's been replaced by the franchise quarterback like 3 or 4 times now. But I think that's the move for them.
Ryan, this move came. I guess I wasn't surprised that they let him go, but it does. It's a cautionary tale a little bit on just maybe doing your recon, because I hear the report. Somebody had, I think it was Diana Rossini, who said that there was a coach on the Washington staff under Jay Gruden, that said they absolutely did not want to draft him, and then the owner kind of forced this to happen. And that, like, there was a coach who literally said, "I went to throw up in the war room because we took Dwayne Haskins." Like, what is this a cautionary tale of in the end?
I think that people's parents matter. And I think we've seen this time and time again in sports. And the red flag that really came up during the draft was that Dwayne Haskins' dad had really pulled a lot of strings for his kid. And whether you like it or not, talent can get you to the NFL, but talent isn't an indicator of who's going to do well in the NFL at all times. There's a level of dedication and hard work that has to come into being a professional football player. And if you haven't had that instilled in you early enough, you're not going to get it. It's not going to come with time. It's not going to grow into you by the time you get to the NFL. That has to be something that's baked into you by the time you get there. The guys that don't work hard, the guys that aren't in the film room, the guys that aren't dedicated to the craft, that don't want to, they're not in for playing football, they're in to be a pro football player. Those are the guys that usually tend to fizzle out, especially at a position like the quarterback position that's so heady, that requires so much time, that requires so much effort, and so much leadership. You can't be a team captain going into a strip club in the middle of a pandemic and then just saying, sorry. Like that's not leadership. And obviously he gets stripped of the captaincy, and then he ends up getting cut from the team. But I think that there's something to be said for his dad pulling those strings and trying to make his way easier. It shouldn't be easy to get to the NFL. It shouldn't be easier to get to these spots. And I know as a parent, there's a lot of people who want those things to be better, who want to work hard and see their kids do well. But at some point, your kid has to work for it. And your kid has to go to Ohio State and not be pulled to be the starter immediately. You can't let your kids skate on certain things. You can't push your kid too hard. You got to let them be a kid. You got to let them grow and learn and make mistakes and fix it themselves. And you just get the feeling from the reports that you hear that Dwayne Haskins never did that. And that's not something that's going to fly in the NFL. For me, this is something that we talked about a little bit between the three of us. He reminds me a little bit of the Todd Marinovich situation, obviously not to that degree, with a dad who pushed him really hard, who it was football all the time, but it was, the dad's more dedicated to it than he was. And I think for me, that's the case. Now, look, I'm someone when he came out, and you guys can attest to this, I was big into Dwayne Haskins. I liked him a lot. He's an Ohio State guy. I'm an Ohio State fan. Yep. I wanted him to be successful. And I really wanted him to be the quarterback that came out of Ohio State, because we really haven't had one. And this is disappointing. It hurts a little bit to see that happen. And I wanted it. I wanted it badly. And I'm sad to say that I was wrong. He's just not mentally ready to play in the NFL. And he just never has been. So it's unfortunate, but I think that's my takeaway from this, is that he just was never in a mental spot where he was going to succeed in the NFL.
Ryan's still waiting for Troy Smith to have his big break in the NFL. Quickly, where does Zach, does he get another chance here? Does somebody sign him as a backup, or somebody give him an opportunity?
I think you'll see him somewhere at some point. But I think the cautionary tale is that the owner needs to stay out of the draft room.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that is my take out of it, is you need to be hands off.
Yeah, especially him. He's not Jerry Jones, and even then I would tell Jerry Jones to stay out of the draft room too. But I mean, I get it. It's his team. He owns it. But let football guys make football decisions.
Yeah, I think he will end up somewhere, right? It might take a while. It might take a year, right? I mean, Josh Rosen has basically been invisible most of this year, but he's the backup this weekend for the 49ers. Mm-hmm. And I think he eventually, will get a shot somewhere. The problem is, right, if you look at the quarterbacks that are available, right, you look at the guys on rosters, aside from the top end, I mean, the backups are so bad. They're all random. So you might want to take a shot on a young guy who could turn back into something.
Yeah. Ryan, does he get a shot?
I think he will be. There's some coach out there whose hubris is enough to say, I can fix that guy. And to be honest, he's chaotic enough he may end up in Las Vegas. I think that's a match made in heaven. As far as drama goes, but look, there's enough teams out there with enough spots open that he's going to land somewhere. I mean, he was a first round talent in the NFL. He looked good enough in college. He's shown flashes at times. He just hasn't done it in the league. And, he, like Carson Wentz, I was saying this earlier this year, he's a guy who I think could benefit from a change of scenery. Get to an organization that knows how to develop somebody, get to an organization and a coaching staff that is willing to put in the time and effort with somebody on the bench to develop them into the next guy. I think that that's probably his role. He's a developmental quarterback at this stage, and he was playing way too early. He's just not ready for the spotlight. He's not ready for an NFL field, and it's unfortunate, but he's got to find a situation that's okay with that.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that one. There was so much news as far as coaching steam this week, and we're going to see a lot of it next week when we talk kind of the end of the season aftermath. But there's going to be – we know that there are 3 coach openings right now in the NFL, in Detroit, in Atlanta, and in Houston. Is there another one too? I think it's those 3, right? We know, or at least we think there could be anywhere from 3 to 5 more after next Sunday, potentially. So we need to play a little game called Hired or Fired, and we'll do this with head coaches, OCs, and then maybe some sneaky outside guys. A lot of steam for some of these guys this week. I know, Zach, you and I were kind of kicking this around a little bit, and Ryan in there too. Let's play a little Hired or Fired. Let's start with Fired. Or hired or fired. Let's Adam Gase with a 2-game winning streak. Is he fired or hired for next year?
He's fired, absolutely. You can't keep that guy.
Zach, is he fired?
Yep, he's done.
So we agree. We think Adam Gase is done. How about Doug Marrone in Jacksonville?
Gone.
Yeah, I think once they fired the GM, the writing is on the wall for him because GMs typically like to pick their own guy.
Yep.
And the ones that are willing to ride with someone are not riding with Doug Marrone.
And honestly, I think that this instantly, especially if you're the new GM coming in and you can get a name to come in, you're going to have the number 1 pick in the draft, who is going to be Trevor Lawrence. So you're going to have Trevor Lawrence, a team that went to the AFC title game 2 years ago, and
which has nobody from it on it still, but that's okay.
And a clean slate.
And is there a juicy name floating out there for that Jacksonville job? We'll get to that in just a second. How about Anthony Lynn?
Gone.
You think Anthony Lynn is fired? I think they've played hard for Anthony Lynn, Zach.
I mean, they've won 3 in a row, right? Which maybe gives you some pause of getting rid of him. I think the conversation with Anthony Lynn is, what are we going to do offensively to develop Herbert? Because this was my complaint, right? My complaint was, okay, Herbert's done all these flashy things, but he's not winning games, and now he is winning some games.
Yeah.
So the conversation may be if you keep him, we need someone else as the offensive coordinator. We need a hotshot young guy to harness it. So, and they could win this last one as well. And so I think he's going to save his job for another year.
All right.
I'm anti Anthony Lynn only because I think that at some point, you've lost too many games that you should have won. This is a guy who is an offensive coach. He was an offensive coordinator and a running backs coach before he came to LA. This is a guy who is running his system, and they're not winning enough games. And at some point, that's an indictment on him. And I think you have this rookie quarterback who is clearly doing good things. You've got a lot of weapons around him. I think you've got a decent offensive line. The problem, I think, is their defense really has been terrible the last couple of years. So that's a struggle, but that's still on him. His guy isn't producing. His guys aren't doing the job on defense. And you're the coach of the whole team. You're not just the coach of the offense. So while you're doing a good job with the young quarterback, you got to find a guy who can do a job with the whole team. And I think that he just runs out of chances. I think that you're going to have a lot of coaches out there who are going to see it as a desirable destination. And I think that they're going to want to try and lure somebody with that credibility to say, we can be a competitive team. We just need a change at the coaching staff.
I feel like they're going to ride it out with Lynn. I have a sneaky suspicion with him, especially if he wins this last game. There's always a little bit of momentum that gets drawn from that. How about, speaking of that though, Ryan, you make a good point on coaches who maybe just want to coach one side of the ball. Does Mike Zimmer, is he hired or fired for next season? Zach,
as much as I hate to say
Ryan.
I think he's back. He gets a pass for a lot of the injuries. I hate it. I don't want him back, but there's been so many injuries.
Yep.
There's so many excuses. You're fielding a practice squad at defense right now.
I don't care about that crap. Everybody is.
No, they're not. Not to this extent. You are on your 9th linebacker.
You can't give up 6 touchdowns to anybody in a game. I don't care who you're throwing out there.
I'm just telling you what the justification for keeping this bozo is going to be.
Right.
I don't want him around. I like Mike Zimmer. I said it earlier in the podcast tonight. I think we're running the wrong philosophy for the team that we have. I think we're doing the wrong thing consistently. We're not in the right positions to win games, and it's because of the coach. I'm anti Mike Zimmer.
All right.
People are going to justify it with saying that we didn't have an NFL caliber defense. Because
I'm not saying it. I don't know excuses. Everybody's got this problem. Right? Zach, is he hired or fired?
I think he's hired because the Wilfs will be reluctant to rock the boat. They know what they've got in Zimmer. He's had some success. He reminds me of Glenn Mason in that, like, he's good. He's not great. Yep. He's been the best that they've had in a long time.
That's true.
And there's always the worry that if you fire him, you hire Tim Brewster.
Yeah. I guess I hadn't thought about it that way. All right. They've they haven't publicly said this, but they have privately hinted that he will come back, but I think it's still worth bringing up because that means they have a chance to change their mind. Vic Fangio. Zach, why don't you go ahead and start with this one? Vic Fangio, hired or fired?
I think Fangio's got one more year to figure it out. And their offensive situation has kind of been a mess all year, right? They played the one game without any quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's terrible.
My worry with Fangio is that the defense hasn't been good, and the offense has been putrid.
Yeah.
But there are stretches when Locke seems to put it together. And so I think he'll get one more year out of the deal. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone. But my gut tells me they're going to give him one more shot at this thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he gets one more shot. I don't think he deserves it. I'll be really clear. I don't think that he deserves another shot. But I think he'll get it just because, for all the reasons that Zach said, but also because who do you bring in? I just don't think it's a very tempting offer at this point. It's not a Jacksonville or an LA or even the Jets where you've got high draft picks and a lot of cap space. Yeah. You've got an aging defense. You got running backs who are inconsistent on offensive line that really isn't very good, and question marks at the quarterback position with a young guy. And the other thing that I think makes this job a little tough is you got to work under John Elway, who I frankly don't think is the best GM, but he's going to stick around because he's got name cred in Denver. And I think that makes it a tough sell for a lot of really good coaches. Are you the guy or is Elway the guy? And that the team is always going to take the GM over you. So why would you take the job? I don't know. It's probably not that big of a factor, but it's a thought that I have every time I think about who could take the job in Denver.
But I think the difference is, or the thing you're missing is, there's only 32 of these jobs.
That's true.
It's true.
And at some point, if you're interested in being the head coach, you got to take your shot. Josh McDaniels. Is he going to get another shot now? I don't know.
I think he will. I don't know if it's going to be this year because I think they're going to be like, all right, go find a quarterback and go make something of that. That was a bad exhibition last night, but I still think he's going to get some cred, especially if the heat that they have on Arians and Brady is true, right? If at the end of the season Brady wants to come back, but if he walks into the owner's office and says, hey, coach and I don't get along. I think him, Leftwich, I don't want to run their system. Get rid of him and hire Josh McDaniels.
Is that actually like steaming?
There's nothing that they can. But a lot of people are saying underneath that this marriage can't exist for more than a year. Like they're saying that it's got to either be, if they don't win the Super Bowl, that it's either going to be Brady or Bruce. Like somebody's got to go. Which I don't know if that's true or not. That might just be, talking point stuff. I don't know how much you can really put into that. I'm just going by what I kind of read and what the rumor mill is. And that is an element of this hired or fired scheme that we haven't really thought about, is like, out of those teams that go to the playoffs, whose expectations get weird and who fires a coach that maybe they shouldn't. Does that happen to, say, Matt Nagy in Chicago or Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona? I mean, we don't know. I think there's always going to be one of those surprises. I think that's fair to say. So we'll have to see if that happens or not.
Yeah.
How about this one? Here's some steam. Now that we've mentioned some first of all, Zach, anybody, or Ryan, anybody that we think might be fired, Zach? Anybody that I've missed?
I think you mentioned Nagy as a possibility. And that one, if he doesn't win this last one and doesn't get in, I could still maybe see it happening. They might just say, we need to start over. But other than that, I think we hit all the high notes.
And we think Peterson's going to come back, right? We feel like Peterson's got enough equity that they're going to give him another year or two in Philadelphia to figure that thing out.
I mean, he went to the playoffs 3 years in a row before this and won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, he should get a little cred. He gets a little cred here, I think, probably.
I think one other name to think about, I don't think it'll be this year, but a name to think about for next year, if it continues the way it's gone, is Cincinnati might try a different coach. They might bring in somebody other than Zach Taylor. He's 6-24-1 in his 2 seasons, obviously this week notwithstanding, but going 6-24-1 isn't exactly inspiring.
Yeah, I was just going to, but you know what? The one thing that's working for him is that he does work for the Brown family, who does not like to fire coaches under any circumstances. I mean, they will ride it out with a coach because they don't want to pay to get another coach. I think that's always been the knock on them, is they don't want to pay for anything, much less pay for another coach. Let me ask you this. There's a lot of steam out there on Ryan's guy, Urban Meyer. A lot of people saying that there's multiple NFL teams. I think this is Schefter, Ian Rappaport, all these guys have all said it. There's at least 2 NFL teams that have inquired about Urban Meyer's services. And there is one team that apparently he is very interested in. That team is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously for the things that Ryan mentioned. Trevor Lawrence. You get to live down in Jacksonville. You get to play Jack's Beach Golf Club. You get to go maybe play TPC Sawgrass whenever you want. It's not bad living in Jacksonville. Zach, do you see Herb coming out of retirement for the 4th time in like 10 years and jumping into an NFL situation this year, or is this just Herb looking for some headlines?
I think this is just Herb likes to be flirted with. I can't see him coming out. I don't think this is his bag, right? Coaching in the NFL is not for him. And I think Ryan agrees with me, but I get calling him, and I get where he likes to say, "Oh, let me think about it a little bit." And then he'll come back in a week and say, "Nah, I'm going to stay what I'm doing."
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cushy job sitting on that ESPN desk every week and breaking down college football.
Is it Fox or ESPN? I think it's Fox.
Either way, I don't remember which one he's on. You might be right. It's Fox. But at the end of the day, here's the thing. I love Urban Meyer. I do.
You do love Urban Meyer. You are you have an unhealthy infatuation with Urban Meyer. It's unhealthy.
Urban Meyer, he brought the first college football playoff to Columbus, and brought that trophy home, and he'll always have a place in my heart for that. But at the end of the day, right, you have guys that are good college coaches because they're good recruiters, and there's no denying that Urban Meyer's a good recruiter. He did well at Florida, he did well at Utah, he did well at Ohio State.
There's violations, I think, in all those too, right?
Building a team. But here's the thing. As a coach, you have to be responsible for the development of men. And it's clear that through his stops in colleges, he has not done that to a sufficient degree. Urban Meyer has failed numerous times with numerous people in character development and character recognition. And in the NFL, we've seen what happens when his players go to the NFL.
They kill people.
They don't do it.
I'm sorry. No, it was just the one. That was just the one. Sorry.
It was just the one. Just that we know of.
God dang it. I hate when that happens.
That we know of. But you've got to remember that Dwayne Haskins is a guy that he recruited too. You got to remember that Eli Apple, his meltdown in New York, that's one of his guys too. You know, the divas, the problems, the attitude issues, the character flaws, those are all things that should be coached out of a guy before they get to the NFL for the most part. Obviously, you're going to have guys that have diva mentalities over and over and over again. Confidence is a thing, and guys become superstars, and you can't do anything about that. But the real character issues, the effort issues, the consistency issues, those are things that should mostly be gone for guys that are coming out of a talent-based program like Ohio State, Florida, Utah to an extent, but really Ohio State and Florida. And he really didn't demonstrate that. And he hasn't demonstrated a flexibility, hasn't demonstrated a scheme that really wins outside of college. So I don't think that he'd be a good fit in the NFL. As much as I love him, I think he'd be better in college, and I don't think he wants to go back to that.
I tell you what, if I was going to call a college coach, it wouldn't be Herb.
Nope.
Oh, yeah, who would it be? Who would it be, Ryan? Or Zach? Who would it be?
Go ahead, Zach.
I think you got to go to Oklahoma.
Yep.
Oh, Lincoln Riley
has shown that he can develop quarterbacks and stars.
Just not a defense. Right? He hasn't proven he can stop anybody.
That doesn't matter. Hire a defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Like
100% agree.
Right? Score and literally you could take the Green Bay approach, which is like we're going to score 40, so the defense has got to make one or two stops a game.
Yep.
You know, and the Green Bay defense has played better and all that, but right, you can literally if you're going to put up all the points in the world, then you hire someone else to be the D coordinator.
But does the Kingsbury thing, though, get in the way of that? Because you look at the Cliff Kingsbury experiment, and we would say that that's an incomplete at best, right? I mean, we don't know if that's a success or not, especially after the last few weeks.
Here's the issue with Cliff Kingsbury is his successes when he's calling plays and coaching come on plays that are aggressive, and at times I think the word could be reckless. You know, you put your players in a position to make plays, and he has a tendency to kind of get conservative, to pull things back a little bit that I don't think you've seen in the really good play callers. You know, that when Doug Peterson was winning the title, Doug Peterson was playing an aggressive, really kind of almost gadgety kind of football. Andy Reid pulls out all the stops in big spots. You look at a guy like Matt LaFleur who lets his players play in a good system because he lets Aaron Rodgers just be Aaron Rodgers. These are things that are things that successful coaches do that Lincoln Riley clearly does at Oklahoma too. And that's something that you really can't train into a coach. Successful coaches know how to put their players in those situations.
So does Jacksonville then? I mean, if you're Jacksonville, then is Zach, is he your first call? Do you call Lincoln Riley first? Okay, if you're Jacksonville and you have the number one pick, who are you calling first? Out of all these coordinators like Eric Bieniemy, out of Robert Saleh, retread guys like Marvin Lewis or Leslie Frazier or Brian Dable or any of these guys, who are you calling first?
I would probably call Bieniemy first.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do that because he's been around the NFL longer. I trust him to be a good offensive mind. He's done it with the quarterbacks. So that's where I would go first.
Okay. And so Eric Bieniemy possibly there. Ryan, you said you kind of did you agree? I think you agreed on that, right? You said you'd call Bieniemy first?
I would. And I think that's just because I think, look, anybody coming out of that Kansas City system, the Andy Reid tree, seems to have done pretty well, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They just have an understanding of how offense is going to work, how offense works in the modern NFL. And I think that's largely because Andy Reid has a truly great understanding of how offense works in the NFL. So Bieniemy would be my first call. I don't know that Lincoln Riley would be my second call either. I don't know who would be my second call, but I have a hard time dipping into the college ranks before I run through all the offensive coaches in the NFL that could come down there and mentor a young quarterback. I think that there's a lot of potential around the league for guys who could end up in that spot. But I agree with Zach. I think Bieniemy is my first call.
Well, and I think, we're going to go through and speculate on all of this, but there are names of guys that we don't even have on our radar, right?
Yep.
I don't think
the Joe Judges of the world.
I don't think any of us would have put LaFleur at the top of the list 2 years ago.
No, you're right.
And he came away with that job, and it's worked out well.
The McVay thing, too, I think was a little bit of a surprise, right? I don't think anybody kind of saw him coming and emerging the way he did, I think, either, right?
Correct.
So I think that there's a couple of different guys you could look at, too. I mean, Todd Bowles has done a great job with that Tampa Bay defense.
There's no way I'm hiring Todd Bowles to be the head coach when I have Trevor Lawrence as the first pick.
Joe Brady from Carolina is a guy you could think about. He's done well with that Carolina offense.
College guy, had some success. Makes sense.
I don't think we should sleep on Brian Daboll. I mean, he's a guy who's done well with the development of Josh Allen. He clearly took a step under Brian Daboll, and they've done good work with him. So you think about a guy who can develop a young quarterback and build a young offense. Brian Daboll comes to mind.
He's a guy that I think I would have never thought about like 3 weeks ago, but I think even after watching last night, you're like, well, he did coach Jalen Hurts to a national championship. He was on all those Super Bowls working with Brady, and he has done this with Josh Allen. Like, he's putting a resume together that makes him hireable. I just don't know if that's the guy I want right now, but he's going to get some looks this year. If it's not this year, I think next year he's going to get a look. But that Jacksonville job's obviously the most coveted, and I think they have the pick of the litter. I think they can have anybody they want. Out of all the teams in the league, I think they're the one team that could have anybody they want because everybody's going to want Trevor Lawrence. Don't you think? If you're an offensive guy like Bieniemy and you have choices, you could go to Houston and have Deshaun Watson. Yeah, that makes some sense. But is that more enticing than Jacksonville? For whoever wants that one?
I don't know that it's more. I don't know that there's going to be a job that's more enticing than Jacksonville at this point, in my mind.
I don't know. It's Deshaun's young, right, Zach? If it's not Jacksonville, where's the top guy going?
I think the interesting thing on this is with Bieniemy is it feels like he could have had jobs by now. And I wonder how many things he decided to wait off or hold off on. And maybe he's looking for something specific. So, maybe Bieniemy doesn't go anywhere. Maybe he knows that the Chiefs' job is open next year, or I don't know.
And it's like a McDaniels thing? Because a lot of people feel like, well, McDaniels had the Colts job. It was in his pocket. He was going to go take it and then decided not to.
He had already hired assistant coaches.
Yeah, he was already ready to take that job and then opted against it. Opportunities have been there for him, so you wonder what he's waited on. And now, yeah, you're right. You wonder if the window closed a little bit. So if Bieniemy's not going to go this year, I don't know when he would go. I feel like his number or his stock has never been higher than this year. He will get a job this year if he wants one. If he wants one. But you're right. If he doesn't want one, then we'll find out. We'll find that question out very quickly.
Yeah, I think they're going to end up going 15-1, and they're going to have the number one seed in the AFC. And if they go to a Super Bowl again, it's almost a guarantee that everyone with an opening is going to be banging down his door. And there might be teams that don't have an opening right now or are projected to have an opening that might ask the question of, hey, if we got rid of this guy, is this a place you'd want to coach?
It's an interesting thought. All right. I was more impressed. I came away – I've been a Robert Saleh guy for about 3 or 4 weeks. I came away more impressed last Saturday against Arizona. I feel like he absolutely is going to get hired somewhere. You want to talk about a team decimated by injuries. They figured out how to play in that game. he's going to get a job, right? Like it's another. He's like Bieniemy, except on the defensive side. He's going to get a job if he wants one, right?
I would think so. I can't think of a reason why he wouldn't.
I've all but handed him the Detroit Lions job. I think he'll be the next head coach of the Detroit Lions. I'm almost 100% certain of that.
I think the only possible thing that scares him off is he's a D coordinator.
Yep.
And everybody is hiring big-time offensive guys right now.
That's true, too. Although they might look at a guy like Brian Flores and say, young D coordinator with fresh ideas, fresh thoughts. Like he could win the locker room, and there's no question Flores and Tomlin may be two of the most liked coaches, and they're defensive guys, but they're team guys, they're players coaches. You feel like Saleh would be a players coach, a guy that maybe they want to play for, especially in Detroit after what happened with Patricia, where he was this stern authoritarian and nobody liked him. You almost have to go completely the other way and bring in somebody who's going to be a player's coach that the team's going to rally behind. He seems like the kind of fit that they would want there.
See, Saleh to me, especially based on his comments this week, seems like a guy that would be a perfect fit. Not his comments, but a comment of the guy on the team that I'm talking about. Seems like a guy that would be a perfect fit in Houston. Based on what J.J. Watt was saying this week, that if you want guys that are dedicated, you want guys that are inspired, that want to play the game. I mean, you've got defensive pieces that are pretty good in Houston. They've been lacking a scheme for the most part for the last 2-3 years. And I think that it could be a really good fit. You've got a talented young quarterback. You've got a guy who's going to be there for a while. There's some stability on offense. You've got to bring in some new pieces, and you've got to hire a decent GM to make it work. But I think that Saleh could be a really good fit for the Houston Texans.
All right, how about Zach? Is there anybody else you want to throw out as a option for hire or fire for next year? Maybe a coordinator or a retread coach or somebody out there that you think you wouldn't be surprised if they have a job sometime in the next month or two?
I think there's a few retreads that deserve consideration, and I don't know if they'll end up with jobs, but like Leslie Frazier's done a pretty good job up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And he wasn't terrible in Minnesota either.
No, he went to the playoffs here. He didn't have a lot to work with here, and he was working off of he got dealt a bad hand, I think, with Christian Ponder, and, that was post-Favre and post-Chili and post-Moss, and Percy Harvin was a pain in the ass. So he inherited some tough things, but he also, took it in stride, right? I mean, he is a guy that took a D coordinator's job, has the experience now, has learned under that, you'd have to think. So maybe Frazier gets a look. Yeah, maybe in front of Brian Daboll. We'll see. What else you have?
I think you'll also maybe see some of the talk of the usual suspects from college. Brian Kelly's name seems to come up now and then. Pat Fitzgerald. We touched a little bit on McDaniels, if he's going to end up getting a look or not. And I agree. I think he still probably now needs to wait another year.
Yeah.
But, I think that too at some point, I think if Pat Fitzgerald was going to go, he would have gone by now. Either to an NFL job or a better college job. And I think he likes what he's doing at Northwestern.
I think there's one name that we really haven't mentioned much and that I haven't heard thrown around much that deserves more attention.
Who's that?
Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. His name got bandied about a little bit last year, for sure.
And this year should help his case quite a bit. That defense has turned into a unit that a lot of teams don't want to play against. They're a top unit against the run. They've really done better against the pass this year. And I think that he's creative. And I think that that's the thing that you look for the most in a head coach for me, is a guy who's willing to adapt to a situation. The really truly versatile guys become really good head coaches. This is kind of what I think of when I talk about how someone like Matt LaFleur has done better than I expected in Green Bay, where he really changed how he wanted to do things to adapt to the situation that he's in. He really wanted to make the relationship work with Aaron Rodgers, so he changed some of the things about himself to make that work consistently. And Matt Eberflus, reportedly, that's something that he's really good at, is adapting his system to fit the players that he's got. And I think that's the hallmark of a guy who's going to be a really good head coach.
He's just got a last name that I'm not sure is hireable. I'm not sure I could hire a guy named Eberflus.
We're in week 17 now, and I still can't figure out Ryan's love fest with the Colts.
Colts may not make the playoffs. That's going to be a tough scene.
If they started today, they're not in.
That's one thing we haven't even broken down is all the crazy playoff scenarios. But yeah, continue. Finish your point on Eberflus, or if you have somebody else.
No. I just want to point out it's not a love fest with the Colts. I think they're a good team and a really strong conference. I don't know what you think this love fest is with the Colts. They have a really, really good defense.
It's got pictures of Frank Reich and Matt Eberflus in his bedroom wall.
We'll have to run back all the footage from the past weeks, but every week it's what a great defense. What a running game, great head coach.
They're not getting run out of the building. I don't know what you want from me here. They're a good team.
They did have the Steelers beat last week, and they didn't finish the job. They needed that game. They really had to have it, right. And that was a tough scene for the Indianapolis Colts. The playoff picture is bananas. I wish I had time to go through it all. We might be able to, but it's pretty simple for a lot of teams. There's a lot of teams in win and in scenarios, right? Like, if Arizona wins, they're in. If Chicago wins and Arizona loses, or is it Chicago wins, they're in, right? Arizona wins and Chicago loses, they're in. That's pretty straightforward. Chicago
wins, they're in. Because, I don't know, it's for Arizona needs a loss by someone.
They need the Chicago loss for sure. They need to win, and they need to get a Chicago loss. Like that, and they might have to win with Chris Streveler as quarterback. Because Kyler's a little banged up. We don't know his status.
But I believe, and I got to pull up the standings here again, but I believe that if Arizona wins, but I guess, okay, so it makes sense, right? They play the Rams.
Yep, and John Wolford at quarterback. Wolford.
If Arizona wins and the Bears win, then the Rams are the odd team out.
Yeah. So, man, 3 weeks ago, we thought the Rams were going to be unbeatable. Like, the Rams looked like they were ready to take on the world 3 weeks ago, and now they might be out of the playoffs with Jared Goff with a bad thumb, and that whole thing's just gone to hell in a basket, like, within 3 weeks for L.A. What a disaster.
I just want to point out that the entire NFC playoff picture completely changes if Green Bay loses to Chicago by some stretch. Right, so if Green Bay loses and all the other teams that need to win, New Orleans is the number 1 seed. Green Bay falls to the 3 seed. Seattle takes the 2 seed, and Tampa Bay would be the 5 seed. They're locked into the 5 no matter what it looks like. So there's a lot of fluctuation that can happen depending on how this game plays out.
In the NFC East, I believe it's Washington has to win and they're in, but if they lose and Dallas wins, Dallas is in. The Giants still mathematically have a chance if they win and Washington loses.
Yeah, if Washington loses, the winner of New York and Dallas is in.
And that's the Sunday nighter. Isn't it? No, it's not the Sunday nighter. Or Washington's the Sunday nighter. Ooh. All right, Taylor Heineke in primetime. Let's go.
Is that who's starting that game?
I think Smith's going to start, but Heineke, if Smith's not 100% ready, I'm willing to bet. No. I am willing to bet $1 that we'll see Taylor Heineke in that game at some point. That's going to happen.
No, I don't want to watch Taylor Heineke play football.
Well, I kind of do, actually. Anyway, there were a lot of Vikings fans who were crazy about Taylor Heineke. Anyway. So that's the NFC scenario. On the AFC, there is a 10-win team that's not going to the playoffs. Like we are very firm on that. That Indianapolis right now is the odd team out, and they're 10-5. And if everybody wins next week and they're all 11, well, that's not everybody because Pittsburgh's playing Cleveland, even though Pittsburgh's going to rest Big Ben. So Cleveland is almost like a 10-point favorite in a game against a 12-win team. That's crazy. You have Indy against. Jacksonville. So you got to think they're going to win that game. Then
that would mean that if Indy wins that game and Cleveland wins, that means that Indy is out at 11-5.
Because couldn't they get in though if, like, say, Baltimore loses?
Yeah. So what
Yeah.
Indy needs a win.
They need a win and help. They need a win and some help.
They need a win, and they need Cleveland, Baltimore, or Miami to lose.
Okay. Out of all of those 10-win teams, who's like? I guess who do you want? Who do you want out of those four? Like, who do you not want to see in the playoffs out of those four?
Miami.
I don't want Indian. They do nothing for me.
Miami's weird because the Tua thing, all football reasoning tells you that you shouldn't be able to go to the bullpen in the fourth quarter to your quarterback. Like, if you have to do that, you have problems. It seems to be working for Miami, though. Like, they go to Tua early. Tua's their guy, but then they got Fitzpatrick in the bullpen, and they bring him in late, and he makes plays, and it was an incredible finish in that Raiders game, but that can't work in the playoffs. Ryan, you agree with me, but Zach, you think it can?
It's a really interesting concept, and I don't know that I like the closer term. Right, for me, this is the long reliever. Right, if your starter's in the game and he's struggling in baseball, you don't leave him out there for the whole game because he's your best starter. You say he doesn't have it today. I need to get someone else in.
Yeah,
and I don't know. It's interesting the way they've bounced back and forth because it's for a long time been like, can't do it. Going to ruin his confidence. You're going to kill this. You're going to kill that. But I think it's worth exploring. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting concept.
I was blown away. First of all, Fitzpatrick's the guy that needs to play right now, right? Like, they really should just be playing Fitzpatrick, right? Like, in a playoff game? Like, if they have to win this game on Sunday, it sounds like they're going to start Tua, but you feel like if they really want to win it, shouldn't Fitzpatrick be the guy at the beginning of the game?
I don't know. I would probably still go with Tua.
Yeah.
I think Tua's got more high end. If Tua's on, he's better.
Yeah, I suppose you're right.
And I guess, is Brian Flores coaching for his job tomorrow?
No, of course not.
Sunday?
No.
Of course not. So I think I go with the long-term vision and say I'm going with Tua.
Okay. It's an interesting move for sure. I mean, and it's definitely the one to play out. And Ryan, you think Miami's not the team to watch, so you'd like to see them sit out for another season. Indy, you like to see get in. Is that because of Phil Rivers, or is that because of your love affair with Matt Eberflus, or what are you thinking?
Well, no, I just think that they present a stronger matchup than Miami does. Personally, I think that defensively they're on the same level as Miami, but I think that they can take it to some teams if they get on. I also think that Miami's probably going to lose next week. They pull Buffalo. It's a tough game. Buffalo's still playing for that that 2 seed. They want they need to prove that they're there. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that they're probably going to be playing hard on Sunday. I don't know. I just don't. I don't like the 2 quarterback thing. I don't want to see that rewarded out of Miami. I'm a big proponent of the idea that if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've got no quarterbacks.
See, I think they legitimately have 2 quarterbacks.
It's fair. It's a fair argument. Yeah. I just don't like it. I don't want to see that rewarded. I don't want to see that become a trend. And obviously, even at 10-6, it becomes difficult to deny. I want to see Indiana.
I don't want to see Tennessee.
More of this unreasonable love affair I have with the Colts, but I want to see Indiana.
I don't want to see Tennessee. I've seen enough of them.
I think here's it's a misnomer. They're not playing 2 quarterbacks like back and forth, alternating series, equal playing time.
Yeah,
they're making a decision about a guy who's struggling and being aggressive, pulling the plug on him. So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, it's like he's still getting the ball like a starting pitcher every week gets the ball, right? Like they're like, hey, you don't have it today, but in 4 days it's going to be your turn in the rotation again. And that's the way it's going to be until further notice. They're going to do that again with Tua. And And you're right. It's not Craig Morton, Roger Staubach, where they're alternating plays and things like that, or alternating series or anything like that. So it is something to keep an eye on, though. It's an interesting concept. You wonder if you'll see Fitzpatrick again, either this weekend or in the playoffs. Personally, I don't want to see Tennessee. I just think we've seen enough of them. Yes, they've blown enough teams out, but they've gotten blown out by good teams now a few times. And the Jekyll and Hyde of Tennessee doesn't do a whole lot for me. I don't mind if they sit at home. All right.
I would like to see Derrick Henry, though.
Yeah, Derrick Henry's pretty good. I agree with that. All right, time for Take Your Pick. Take Your Pick has been great. Zach went 2-1 last week, as did I. Ryan went 1-2.
Playing some catch-up.
Yeah. Well, when we get to the playoffs, we're actually gonna, for Take Your Pick in the playoffs, we're gonna pick every game in the playoff round. Starting next week, so you get a chance to really make some things. It's like double Jeopardy. You could just you could really go for it there. That's all right. How about this one? Miami versus Buffalo. The Buffalo team is 3.5-point favorites heading into this game. They just came a huge win. They just beat the crap out of New England. A huge demon exerciser. They sweep New England for the first time in like 1,000 years. What do they do with this Miami team? Zach, we'll start with you first. You were 2-1 last week. You've been winning this whole thing. Let's start with you, I guess. Let's go Miami, Buffalo.
I'll start by taking the Bills and laying the points. I think that they are they need the game, right? It's still going to matter for them. Although it's very interesting that the Steelers said they're not going to start Ben this week, and that's their competition for the 2 seed. But I think Buffalo will come out. They'll play their guys, and they will win by a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm on the Bills too. I'm going to take them in the points. I just think that they're a more talented team than Miami is.
I'm going to take Miami in this game with the letdown factor in Buffalo a little bit. I think that win was big, and I think with Big Ben sitting, and I think Pittsburgh's doing that because they've played like 5 games in 20 days. I think they've gotten to the point where they just need to sit guys, and the rest is way more important than playing. So they've taken that approach. I think Buffalo has a little letdown here. I think it's a competitive game. I think it's a good game. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if Miami wins this game 20-17. All right. The oldest rivalry in sports, Green Bay versus Chicago on the road. The Bears are 5.5-point underdogs. Ryan, 5.5-point underdogs for the Bears against the Packers.
Give me Green Bay with the points. I think that they're playing hard for the first seed, and I think they get it.
They are playing well. Zach?
That was very different than your comment last week, Ryan.
I was proven wrong, man. I don't know what you want me to say.
I mean, right? You predicted a Tennessee win straight up, or Green Bay to win a nail biter. I think that the Packers will control this game from start to finish. 5.5, it makes me a little worried. Just because depending on what's going on in other games and how their game is going, I could see them letting off the gas a little. But I will take Green Bay and lay the points again.
I think the Trubisky truthers are onto something here. I think they are ready to hang in this game. They have found a little something here, and I think they're getting in the playoffs. Like, I really do. Even though we've had them in the elimination chamber for a month, I have a feeling that they're going to be there. I don't know. I feel like, well, first of all, 1 or 2 of the elimination chamber teams might get in the playoffs if you figure Dallas or Chicago. I think Green Bay wins, but I think Chicago covers. I think 5.5 is too much. I think they might lose by a field goal, but I think Chicago's going to hang in this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if Trubisky plays well. Would not be surprised. All right, here we go. Last one, Dallas versus the New York Giants. The Giants are 3-point underdogs. 3-point underdogs at home. Dallas has played pretty well as of late. They've kind of found something offensively, and especially after getting down big to Philadelphia last week, they came from behind. They scored like 30-some unanswered, and they won the game going away. Zach, Dallas versus the Giants.
I'm going to stick with my trend all week, and I will take the favorite. Dallas is playing better at the right time, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I think they're still going to come up short in that aspect, but Dallas will win this game.
I got to make up some ground here. I'm going to take the Giants. I'm going to take the Giants, not for any reason other than I need to make up ground, but I'll try and justify it here by saying I think the Giants have a better defense than Dallas has seen in a little while. I think that Philly defense is a little uninspired. I think I think against the pass that Giants defense is a little bit better than Philadelphia's is, because I think Philadelphia's is better against the run than the Giants are. So I'm going to take New York here to win and Washington to lose, and New York gets into the playoffs as the NFC East champion.
I'm going to take the Giants because it's the Jason Garrett Bowl, and I think he will call the most inspired game of his coaching life to win this game, and I think he would love to stick it to the Cowboys. Either that or it's an inside job, and he's really truthfully still getting paid by Jerry Jones. One or the other is going to happen, but we're going to find out something. I think the Giants win this game. It really depends on Daniel Jones, I think, but I feel like Dallas is due to lay an egg. Dallas still stinks. Like, they're still not a good team, and so I would not be shocked if they lose this game. Give me the Giants. I'll take them to win. Straight up, I think they'll beat them. And I know they're 3-point favorites. I think they obviously cover that 3, and I think they win the game. That's where I'm going on that one. So there we go. Take your pick. Time for your last power ranking of the season. Your last power ranking of the season. We have been documenting who the top 5 teams are in the league every week for the last 16 weeks. We're going to do it again for week 17. We won't need to do it next week because everybody will be in the playoffs and it'll be all set. So your last power rankings, I feel like we're the AP for the college football team, college football playoff, but here we are again. The number 1 seeded team, or the number 1 team in our playoff, our power poll, is the Kansas City Chiefs still, or do we think they've slipped?
No, I've still got the Chiefs as number 1.
I think they've slipped, but I still have them as number 1.
Yeah, I think they're number 1 as well. I still think you got to beat the champs if you want to be them right now. They're 14-1. They're the number 1 seed. They're the only team that has home field locked up. Mahomes is winning ugly, but he's winning. And they're the champs until proven otherwise. Green Bay, though, has made some gains. I think Green Bay is my number 2. I don't know. I'm assuming number 2 for you, Zach, as well.
Yep, Green Bay is number 2.
Ryan?
Same. I got Green Bay.
And we think Buffalo is entrenched at number 3. I think Buffalo is still really, really good, and they have made some gains here, too. This is pretty close between 1 and 3, but I like Buffalo as the 3.
I'd agree with that.
I would as well.
All right, so we're good on the top 3. Now here's again where things have changed before. Number 4, I am going to go I'm going to take Seattle here still. I think give me Russell Wilson in a big spot. They have played better here as of late. The defense has come alive. Jamal Adams looks like the player that they traded for. Seattle's a dangerous team come playoff time. I like them as my 4 seed.
I have New Orleans. I think that showing on Christmas Day answered a lot of questions for me offensively. And, now they don't have to play Minnesota in the playoffs, so even better for them.
Good point.
I've got Seattle here. New Orleans gets no points for me for beating a team that was starting 3rd stringers across the board. I'm sorry, but if that's it was expected.
Does Tampa get points for beating a team that only brought 3 coaches to the game on Saturday against the Lions?
Coaches aren't on the field, my friend. 3rd stringers across the board gets New Orleans no points. They are my 5th seed, but I'm gonna put Seattle at number 4.
Oh man! All right, number 5, my 5th seeded team. I'm gonna take. I have New England at 5. I'm gonna or not New England. I have New Orleans at 5. New Orleans, yeah, New England. After that great performance on Monday night, where Cam Newton threw for 34 yards, they're the 5th best team in the NFL. Go Cam Newton! No, I'm kidding. I have New Orleans at 5. I think, again, this is about coaching in the playoffs, and give me a thoroughbred coach and Sean Payton when the money's on the line. I think they're going to figure out how to hang in there, and I think they're going to make the playoffs and be a really, really tough out in these first couple of rounds. They don't get a bye. That's true. Or at least they still could, I guess, if something weird goes wrong with Green Bay. But I feel like Green Bay is going to hang on to that bye. But I still like them. I still think it's going to be a tough out no matter what. Who's the 5th seed for you guys?
I'm dipping down to the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're playing well at the right time. They've won 4 in a row, and they've been in the playoffs the last couple of years. They haven't had the success that they've wanted, but that playoff tested, I think, will prove valuable for them here coming up.
And Ryan?
Like I said, I'm going to the New Orleans Saints. I think that they're a good team.
They just get no credit for beating the Vikings last week.
No, they don't move up in my rankings for beating the Vikings. I'm sorry. The Vikings have been done for 2 weeks. They have no one on defense. That's a walking hospital unit. Nobody gets credit for beating the Vikings like the Saints did. Credit to Alvin Kamara. You did it on an NFL field. The record counts. But, man, that team has nobody out there right now. So
some would argue San Francisco doesn't have anybody. They figured out a way to slow down Kyler Murray.
I'm just saying, you get no credit from me for getting your 3rd and 4th string guys the crap kicked out of. That's.
Oh, I love it. All right, go ahead, Zach.
I think a lot of people are sleeping on Baltimore for that rough stretch in the middle of the year, but they actually do lead the NFL in point differential.
Yeah, they've played well. Lamar Jackson's played really well as of late. They've started to figure some things out. I think the thing I like the best about the Ravens is at least they're starting to work wide receivers into the fold. Like you saw Hollywood Brown get a touchdown. Des Bryant has caught a touchdown now in each of the last couple of weeks. Little Huck has joined the podcast, which is great. That's fantastic. So I like Baltimore. I like what they're doing, but they're not even securely in the playoffs yet. So I just have a hard time putting them as the 5. But I get what you're saying. And if they get in, they're going to be a tough out. If they're one of the top 7 teams in, they're going to be a really tough out. All right.
I agree. Should I get there first?
Yeah, I agree. Time for the Elimination Chamber. And actually, it's a double elimination because 2 teams found their way out this weekend. And we have to eliminate a couple anyway because in order to make it all work, we got to take 2 teams out. It's pretty easy for us this weekend, I think, right? 2 teams were eliminated. One for sure was the Philadelphia Eagles. They were the last NFC East team that we hadn't eliminated yet besides Washington. Like I said, we're going to be wrong potentially on either Dallas or the Giants. We're going to be wrong. And we might be wrong on the Bears, but we'll see. My hope is, though, we are not wrong on anybody. So we need Washington to win to preserve this and Arizona to win to preserve this. But Philadelphia eliminated finally on their way to the chamber. Who else was eliminated this weekend? I think 2 teams were...
The Raiders.
The Raiders, yes. Oh, dear God. Oh, Jesus. That was as bad a loss as... And I mean, I'm a freaking Vikings fan, and that loss was one of the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's 2 this year that they shouldn't have lost in the waning moments. I just can't believe it. I don't know how you can. I don't know how you can be a coach in the NFL and lose like that.
It wasn't a good one. If John Gruden is smart this offseason, he will call a high-end, bona fide defensive coordinator to help him make smarter calls at the end of a game. You know,
we should trade him Mike Zimmer.
We'll give him Mike Zimmer for one of those 90 first-round picks he's traded for in the last 4 years. We'll be happy to do it if they want to give that up.
Could you imagine Zim and his girlfriend out in Vegas?
Oh. But you know what? I think he'd fit right in there. It'd be commonplace out there. I mean, you got David Copperfield who's with, 20-year-old models, I'm sure, still, right? I mean, it'd be just like a Vegas show. It would be perfect. Or is he still, I don't know, is he with Claudia Schiffer? I'm trying to remember who David Copperfield is with. But I'm sure he could have anybody he wants. Look, I'm sure he could have anybody he wants. I don't know. But Zim, Marvin Lewis, you name it. Go find Matt Patricia. Okay, not Matt Patricia. Anybody but Matt Patricia, go get him and hire him as the defensive coordinator immediately. You need help back there in a big way. So the Raiders, the Eagles, you are on your way to the Elimination Chamber. Goodbye. We'll see you. It was fun while it lasted. All right, guys. The playoffs are here next week. By the time we sit down for our pod next week, we will know the full playoff scene. We will probably know who's fired. I'm guessing we'll have a couple of openings pop, and we'll talk more about that as we go. And we will break down the playoff matchups and look ahead the entire week next week. It's going to be great. I can't wait to have it. Anything that we should look forward to before we jump to that playoff pod?
I just think it'll be a fun Sunday. With everything up in the air in the AFC still, including, the AFC South. And then you've got all those other teams jockeying for position. The Sunday night game is going to be fun, even if it is a little bit of a train wreck. It'll be hard to look away. I just think it'll be a good week of football, and I'm glad that the NFL made the change.
I did too.
A handful of years ago where they went to all the conference games.
Yep. And I like that they put them all on Sunday, that there is no Thursday night game, there's no Saturday game, no Monday night game. Everything's happening on Sunday.
Yeah, and it was something that I had brought it up, I think the year before it happened. I said, because they were talking like, well, the last week just doesn't mean anything. There's not enough. I said, well, if you put divisional games on the last week, it adds a lot more to everything because, in essence, right, like those are worth a game and a half.
Yeah. So. Should be fun to watch. I can't wait to see it. It will be a good one. And I guess congratulations are in order. I think the NFL might have just stopped testing people, but we're going to get all 256 NFL regular season games in. And we somehow survived this craziness, and we will get to the playoffs next week. I cannot wait. Also, college football playoff is this weekend as well, so Rye will be paying very close attention to that. I think Zach will as well. We'll have a conversation perhaps about that next week. That might even be its own pod. We'll have to find out. But a lot of stuff happening in the next week or two. The NBA is up and running. I don't think anybody wants to talk about that on this pod, but if somebody does, we'll be happy to talk NBA. Me and Zach are embroiled in a hardcore fantasy basketball matchup this weekend. This is going to be a very intense game between Zach and I, but other than that, yeah. Ryan, you watching a lot of hoops?
I just want to point out that according to my Twitter feed, Anthony Edwards is a man on fire right now for your Minnesota Timberwolves.
All right, I'll have to go and check that out.
I just want to point out that not only are we in a battle – but that it is for first place. We are tied for first place right now.
That's right. It's early in the season, but every game counts. And Zach and I are in a grueling head-to-head matchup this week. It should be a fun one for Fantasy Hoops. Also, just a preview, let everybody know, Peak Cinema with Lauren comes your way. We're recording that one this week. It's The Mummy from 1999 and a deep dive on Brendan Fraser. Looking forward to that. My golf preview podcast starts next week as well. I'm going to do about 20-30 minutes on the golf matchup of the week on the PGA Tour and lay out my FanDuel sports picks that week. That's going to be fun. Anybody who wants to jump in and talk golf with me on that short pod, they're more than welcome to as well. And baseball stuff, pro wrestling stuff, the Royal Rumble's coming soon. Top Rope Radio will be back very soon in a few weeks, and then we'll have an MLB stuff. We're waiting more on more MLB things, but Zach and I will be sitting down talking baseball real soon as well. So much stuff happening in 2021 on the podcast. I want to thank everybody for continuing to listen. Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Podbean.com, Facebook.com/Tim Podcast. You can find us there. Happy New Year to everybody. And we will see you back next week to break it all down and start our 2021 podcast season. So for Ryan, for Zach, I'm Tim, saying keep your head up, and we'll see you next time.